Welcome everyone to Behind the Signs. I'm Nathan, and today with us we have an amazing estate planning attorney and business planning attorney, Patrick Elahmadie, and
Hello.
so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
You and I were chopping it up a little bit before the show, and you were saying on the business side of your planning practice, you also help business owners and real estate investors. We definitely have real estate investors that we work with. How how is it that your practice comes into play to help those who are real estate investors or deciding to try their hand at investing in real estate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the goal from my perspective is to limit risk. And what that means is limiting liability. So if you have a property, for example, that you're renting out and you have an issue at that property, and maybe it's a landlord tenant issue, maybe it's a slip and fall, maybe it's some type of damage, et cetera, et cetera. If you get sued and that's a successful lawsuit, there's no limit to what they can go after. They
Oh
can
man.
go after not just the value of your investment, but also your personal assets, your bank account, your investment accounts, your own home. And so, one of the bedrock principles of business in America and what the goal with a lot of people is to create a entity, a business structure, whether it's an LLC or an S corp or something like that, to house that rental property or whatever the business is, because what that does is it creates a line between you and the business. You say, hey, if you have an issue with my business, sue my business. And if you win, you can take everything that's in it. But assuming you as the business owner have done everything properly, there's this line that they can't get past that is going to protect your personal assets from the risks involved in your business. And of course, whether with any business, with any investment, there's going to be risk. So it's a matter of risk assessment. For example, I have a lot of clients that own real estate. Maybe they own a rental property. I always advise them, consider putting that property into an LLC.
Mm,
If you have it in an LLC, what you've done is you've limited your risk to your cost in that investment.
mm.
And of course, nobody wants to lose their investment, but also you don't want to lose your investment and your home, right? And
Nope.
so there are people that own multiple properties. The safest thing is probably to have an LLC per property. That's what I recommend for people. At least that's the most risk averse approach. Because if you have, let's say you have three properties, three investment properties, and they're all housed in one LLC. Well, that's great. You still have a line between your investments and your personal assets, but you don't have a line between one investment and another investment. So if you
Mm,
have an issue at one property, now all of your properties are at risk.
mm,
Also not great. So I think the balance here is you want to assess the costs involved because setting up an LLC costs some money. And just for the privilege of having an LLC in California, you have to pay $800 a year to the Franchise Tax Board per
mm.
LLC. So a lot of times when people run the numbers, depending on the type of investment, they might think, okay, well, financially, this doesn't make sense. Me as a lawyer, I'm very risk averse. So I always think, what's the worst that can happen and how can we protect against it?
Mhm.
And California being as litigious and pro-tenant of a state as it can get, pretty much, and out of all 50, I would want to protect myself and my investments as much as possible. And so, the cost of setting up an LLC, maybe $1,500 plus the $800 per year. That might seem like a lot of money, but at the same time, think about what you're getting for that is you're getting a shield that steps in between your investments and your personal assets. And God forbid something terrible happens, at least they're not going to go after my stuff.
Mhm.
I think it's an important thing to think about. And then it also plays into the estate plan because, for a lot of my real estate investor clients, what we'll do is we'll create an LLC per per property. They might have a holding company that owns all of them. They might not, a holding company LLC. But eventually what happens is all of those interests get funneled into the trust. So we take those LLC membership interests and we put them in the trust. That way, from the business side, they're protected. Their investments are protected from each other. Their personal assets are protected from a risk of what might happen in the investment. And at the same time, those assets are all in the trust so that if something happens to them, there's not probate over all of these assets.
Hmm.
So that's usually the structure we're trying to create.
Excellent. Okay. So, what would you say to somebody who is like, hey, um, I'm thinking about making my first investment. A lot of times, what that looks like in my world, and maybe yours as well, is someone there's a family and they've bought a home and they've put some money into it and built up their equity over some years, and then they say, it's time for an upgrade. And they have the ability to go then buy another property, but they say, you know what? We like having our other property. Why don't we just rent out the first one? Especially if it's in um, a city that is not as pro-tenant as some of the cities that are in the Bay Area. So you're saying that that family would be a great candidate. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. To create an LLC, to take that rental property and put it into the LLC, would allow them that level of protection that creates distance between their business now, which is, now they have a rental property, they have a business, between their business and their personal assets. Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
Excellent. So that could again shield them from major loss in the event that there was some kind of injury or any kind of lawsuit that was involved with the property that the LLC was in. And would
Mhm.
this also be why you see a lot of businesses in LLCs as well, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Anytime, once people get to a certain level and they understand the risks and what they have to lose and what they have to gain, they usually end up landing on the side of forming some type of entity. It's usually a good idea. A lot of people they understand that inherent in business is risk, right? That's kind of part and parcel.
Mhm.
Once they are operating in that space, they get to know the business more and more, and they get to know the risks more and more. And so, of course, you should have good insurance, but a lot of times there are things that insurance won't cover. A lot of insurance companies are in the business of figuring out how to deny claims. So you always want there to be some backstop at the end of the
Mhm.
day. You always want there to be something stopping a litigant from going further because nobody wants to lose their business, but nobody wants to lose their business and their home. That's
Yeah.
just nightmarish. So you
Yeah.
want to do what you can to set yourself up to avoid the worst case scenarios.
Excellent. And you're all about helping people plan for the future and help them insulate and keep what they've worked so hard to build.
That's my goal.
All right. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for being here with us today on the show. And, you know, sometimes people are afraid of speaking to an attorney because they think it's going to be this person in a three-piece suit,
Mhm,
and that to get in touch with them is like impossible. They're going to call this number and go through this phone tree, and they're going
mhm,
to follow through all this, and set up an appointment for 3 years from now so that
mhm,
you could then
mhm.
talk to an intake person who will then interview you and suck all the information out of you for an hour, and so that you can then have the privilege to spend the first $1,000 for 15 minutes to talk to an attorney to find out, oh, you're probably not the right one. What's it
Mhm.
going to be like? What would it be like, getting in touch with you?
I'm glad you brought that up because yes, that is the fear that a lot of people have, and it does exist. It's not coming out of nowhere. Some people operate like that. That's
Mhm.
not really my approach. I am a solo entrepreneur. When people call me, it rings to my cell phone. I answer while it's
Your cell
ringing,
phone.
probably 80% of the time, and
Oh my
when I
gosh.
can't, I call them right back, usually within an hour. So I'm very that is the number one complaint about attorneys that they're not responsive enough. So that's something I've tried to be very mindful in my practice. When people call, I do my best to answer, or if I'm in a meeting, I'll call definitely same day, usually within an hour or two. So that's really important to me because I want people to feel a lot of times when they pick up the phone, they want to talk to you now. They don't want to talk to you next week. Maybe they have something on their mind. Maybe they need some type of reassurance or some type of advice. And the sooner they get it, the sooner they can feel better about whatever is plaguing them. So I recognize that and I try to be as available as possible. And for people that just want to learn more, so I spend a lot of time educating people, whether it's on the business side or the estate planning side. I don't charge for consultations. I'll usually do a 30-minute or sometimes hour consultation talking to someone about their specific situation, about estate planning generally, or about the difference between LLCs and S corps, or whatever it is that they need to learn about. And I'm happy to do that. That's kind of built into my approach. So I'd say anybody that wants to learn more, feel free to pick up the phone and call me. I will probably answer as it's ringing. If you want to come in and swing by my office, we'll find a time, usually that week, to have a conversation. Because this is what I love. I've been a consumer a lot longer than I've been a business owner. And so I've finally attuned to what I do and don't like when working with businesses. And I try to run my business in a way that I would want to interact with it if I was a consumer. And so again, feel free to call anytime and I'd love to have a conversation.
That is so great, Patrick. You and I are so much alike. We're trying to reduce the friction from the people that we serve and help. And and the problem is that it's just so oftentimes it's lack of knowledge and just to have somebody that will pick up the phone and chat with you and talk to you about your situation, that's huge. So we will have your information available at the end of this podcast, so you can reach out to Patrick and talk about your estate planning or business planning needs. And so this is Nathan Gines with Behind the Signs and with Patrick Elahmadie, estate planning and business attorney. And or thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much,
having me,
Patrick.
Nathan. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. God bless.